Jake Martinez shifted in his seat as the morning alarm echoed through the metal halls of Kepler 7 station. The sound always reminded him how far from Earth he really was. 6 months ago, he had been working on his engineering degree in Colorado. Now he sat in a classroom filled with beings that looked like they came from his worst nightmares or wildest dreams. The Galactic Military Academy accepted only the best warriors from each species. Jake still wondered how he had gotten in. His test scores were good, but he had no claws, no acid spit, no ability to phase through walls. He was just human. Commander Vextai entered the classroom like a walking crystal sculpture. The Zephyrian stood 8 feet tall, his transparent blue body catching the artificial light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Today we change plans," Vextai announced. "Put away your data pads. Today you show me what your people really are." Jake felt his stomach drop. He knew this day would come eventually. Every species at the Academy had some kind of natural gift for warfare. The Cathera could dissolve metal with their spit. The Terrans could turn their skin harder than diamond. The Nebulans could become gas and slip through any crack. Amy Foster, the only other human in the class, caught Jake's eye from across the room. She looked as worried as he felt. They had talked about this problem many times. What did humans bring to a fight against aliens who were living weapons? "Each of you will demonstrate your species' natural combat ability," Vextai continued. "You may use only what you find in this room. You have 1 hour. Begin now." The classroom exploded into action. Kixara, the insect-like Cathara student, immediately began examining the metal desk frames. Jake watched as green acid dripped from her mandibles onto the titanium alloy. The metal hissed and bubbled, dissolving into a liquid that Kixara began shaping into sharp projectiles. Grom, the Terran student who looked like a walking boulder, simply stood in place. Jake could hear the grinding sound as Grom's rocky skin transformed. In seconds, Grom's already tough exterior became a surface that could stop plasma bolts. The Terran picked up a chair and crushed it into powder with one hand. Wisp, the Nebulan, was the strangest to watch. His body began to spread apart like smoke, becoming less solid by the second. Soon he was just a cloud of intelligent gas that could move through the air vents and reform behind any enemy. Other students displayed equally impressive abilities. The Voltaic twins generated electricity between their hands. The Aquan student began secreting a paralytic poison from his skin. The Christek student grew new limbs made of living metal. Jake looked around the room and saw exactly what he expected to see. Broken furniture from years of training exercises, a few data tablets that had been cracked during combat practice, standard academy equipment that was built to survive anything. Amy approached him, her face pale. "What are we going to do?" She whispered. "I can't grow claws or breathe poison. I'm just human." "Just human," Jake repeated, looking at the scattered debris around them. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory from summers spent in the old man's workshop behind their house in Denver. "There's no such thing as just human, boy. Humans are the ones who look at problems and make solutions." Jake walked to the corner where someone had stacked broken desk parts during a previous class. The legs were made from the same titanium steel alloy used throughout the station, strong, light, and designed to last for decades. He picked up a leg that had been snapped off cleanly, probably during a Terran strength demonstration. Commander Vextai noticed Jake's movement and drifted over, his crystalline form casting colored shadows. "Human Cadet Martinez, your species has no natural weapons. Perhaps you should observe how real warriors prepare for battle." Jake tested the weight of the metal rod in his hands. About 3 feet long, good balance, solid construction. "My species has something better than natural weapons, sir." Vextai's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "And what might that be?" "We have imagination." Jake began examining the other broken furniture. A chair with 3 legs missing. A desk with a cracked top. Data tablets with shattered screens but intact metal frames. Most species would see garbage. Jake saw raw materials. The other cadets had stopped their own preparations to watch. Jake could feel their confusion. Why was the human collecting broken things instead of preparing to fight? Amy moved closer. Jake, what are you doing? The test starts in 40 minutes. I'm getting ready, Jake said, using his multi-tool to carefully measure the desk leg. Grandfather always said the best weapon is the one you make yourself. Kixara clicked her mandibles in what Jake had learned was Cathara laughter. The human thinks to build weapons like a primitive. How amusing. Grom's voice rumbled like stones, grinding together. Humans use tools because they are weak. Real warriors need only their bodies. Jake ignored them and continued his work. He had learned not to argue with aliens who could kill him in dozens of creative ways. Instead, he focused on the materials in front of him. The desk leg was hollow, which was perfect. Jake could already see the weapon taking shape in his mind. The fabric from the chair cushions could be useful. The microcables from the broken data tablets might work for binding. Even the synthetic rubber from the floor mats could serve a purpose. Commander Vextai watched Jake's methodical examination of the debris with growing interest. Most cadets rushed into displaying their natural abilities. The human was taking time to study and plan. 30 minutes remaining, Vextai announced. Jake had finished his inventory. Now came the hard part. He needed to turn a collection of broken furniture into something that could compete with living weapons that had evolved over millions of years. He looked at Amy, who was still standing nearby with no idea what to do for her own demonstration. Want to learn something my grandfather taught me? Amy nodded, grateful for any plan that might save them both from complete humiliation. Humans don't have claws or acid or diamond skin, Jake said, beginning to strip the synthetic fabric from a chair cushion. But we have something none of these other species understand. What's that? Jake smiled as he began his work. We have 10,000 years of figuring out how to kill things with whatever we could find lying around. The alien cadets continued their preparations, but Jake noticed more of them glancing his way. They were curious about what the primitive human thought he could accomplish with broken furniture. Commander Vextai made a note on his datapad. In his experience, species without natural weapons usually failed these exercises quickly, but something about the human's calm confidence suggested this might be different. Jake had started to work on the desk leg with his multi-tool, and the sound of metal being carefully shaped began to fill the classroom. The rhythm was steady, purposeful, and completely unlike anything the other cadets were doing. 20 minutes remained and Jake was just getting started. Jake worked with steady hands while chaos erupted around him. The alien cadets had begun testing their natural weapons, and the classroom filled with strange sounds and smells. Acid hissed against metal. Electricity crackled between fingers. The air itself seemed to move with malicious intent as Wisp practiced his gas form attacks. But Jake focused only on the broken desk leg in his hands. Using the precision cutting tool from his multi-tool, he began to reshape the hollow titanium tube. His grandfather had taught him that every piece of metal had a weapon hiding inside it. You just had to know how to find it. What is the human doing? Asked Zara, a voltaic student whose skin sparkled with stored electrical energy. She had paused her own preparation to watch Jake work. Making noise, Grom rumbled. The Terran had finished turning his skin to diamond hardness, and now stood like a living statue. Humans are loud when they work, like animals. Amy knelt beside Jake as he worked. Can you really make a weapon from this junk? This isn't junk, Jake said, not looking up from his careful cutting. This is a titanium steel alloy stronger than anything humans had when we first started making spears. Our ancestors made weapons from wood and stone that conquered continents. This is much better material. Jake had separated the desk leg into two pieces. The longer section would become the shaft. The shorter piece he began reshaping into a spear. Point. His movements were deliberate and practiced, like he had done this work before. Commander Vextai approached their work area. His crystalline head tilted as he examined Jake's progress. Cadet Martinez, you understand this exercise tests natural combat abilities? You cannot simply craft tools. Sir, making tools is my species' natural combat ability, Jake replied, using a metal edge to scrape the titanium into the proper shape. Humans don't have acid or diamond skin. We have this. He tapped his temple with one finger, leaving a small smudge of metal dust on his forehead. Vextai's form shimmered, which Jake had learned meant the Zephyrian was thinking hard. Elaborate. Jake continued shaping the spear point as he talked. Every other species here evolved one way to fight. Kythera make acid, Terrans get hard skin, Nebulans become gas. But humans evolved to look at problems and solve them differently every time. That is not a weapon, Kythera clicked from across the room. She had finished creating a dozen acid-formed projectiles and was arranging them by size. That is primitive tool-making. Same thing, Jake said simply. Amy watched Jake work on the spear point with growing amazement. He was using techniques she had never seen before, bending and shaping the metal with just basic tools and clever application of pressure. Where did you learn to do this? My grandfather was a blacksmith before he became an engineer, Jake explained. He said humans had been making weapons for so long that we forgot it was supposed to be hard. Jake had finished the basic spear point and was now working on the shaft. He wrapped sections with fabric strips torn from chair cushions, creating a grip that wouldn't slip in combat. The microcables from broken data tablets became binding wire, securing the point to the shaft with a technique that distributed stress across multiple contact points. The other cadets had gathered to watch. Now, even the ones who had finished their preparations came over to see what the human was building. 15 minutes remaining, Commander Vextai announced. Jake tested the balance of his improvised spear. The weight felt right in his hands. The point was sharp enough to penetrate most armor. The shaft was strong enough to survive impact without breaking. But he wasn't finished yet. Using rubber strips from floor mats, Jake created a shock-absorbing section near the grip. He added small metal fragments to the binding, creating texture that would improve his hold, even if his hands became wet with sweat or blood. This is impossible, Wisp said, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. Weapons require biological adaptation. They cannot be made from furniture. Humans have been making weapons from whatever they could find for thousands of years, Amy said, finally understanding what Jake was doing. We turned rocks into knives, sticks into spears, and metal into swords. Jake stood and held up his completed weapon. The spear looked crude compared to the sleek biological weapons around him, but it felt perfect in his hands. Balanced, sharp, and ready for use. Commander Vextai examined the weapon without touching it. This appears functional, but how does it compare to evolved weaponry? Only one way to find out, sir, Jake said. The alien cadets exchanged glances. Most of them had never seen a manufactured weapon before. Their species had evolved past the need for tools, developing biological solutions to combat problems. The idea that someone would build a weapon instead of growing one seemed backwards and primitive, but something about the humans' confidence made them uneasy. Jake held his improvised spear like he had been born with it in his hands. He moved with the weapon naturally, testing different grips and stances. Time, Commander Vextai called. Jake looked at his spear one final time. It wasn't pretty, but it was exactly what he needed. His grandfather would have been proud. The old man had always said that humans were dangerous, not because they were strong or fast or tough, but because they never stopped thinking of new ways to win. Now Jake would find out if his grandfather had been right. The testing arena hummed with energy as Commander Vextai activated the combat systems. Holographic targets materialized in the air, their surfaces gleaming with simulated armor plating. Energy barriers flickered to life between the cadets and their objectives. The smell of ozone filled the room as the station's defensive systems came online. Kythera, you are first, Vextai commanded. The Kythera student stepped forward, her forearms moving in perfect coordination. She launched her acid projectiles in rapid succession, each one striking a different target. The improvised weapons dissolved through the holographic armor like it was paper, leaving smoking holes where they hit. Excellent use of biological adaptation, Vextai noted, making marks on his evaluation pad. Next, Grom, the Terran cadet approached the targets like a walking siege engine. His diamond-hard skin deflected the energy bolts that the defense system fired at him. When he reached the targets, he simply punched through them. his rocky fists shattering the projected armor into digital fragments. One by one, the alien cadets demonstrated their species' natural weapons. Wisp became a cloud of poisonous gas that flowed around energy barriers and reformed behind the targets. The Voltaic twins combined their electrical abilities to create plasma bolts that could melt through any defense. Jake watched each demonstration carefully. Every alien student used the same basic approach their species had developed over millions of years of evolution. They were powerful, efficient, and completely predictable. Human Cadet Martinez, Vextai called. Show us what your people contribute to warfare. Jake stepped into the arena, his improvised spear held loosely in his right hand. The holographic targets reset themselves, creating a fresh challenge. Energy barriers activated, humming with defensive power. Begin, Vextai commanded. Jake didn't move toward the targets immediately. Instead, he studied the arena layout, looking for angles and opportunities that the previous cadets had missed. The targets were positioned to challenge direct assault tactics. The energy barriers formed a maze that forced attackers to approach from predictable directions, but Jake wasn't planning a direct assault. He moved to his left, using the arena's gravity generator as an anchor point. With practiced motion, he hurled his spear not at the targets but at the metal support beam above them. The spear struck the beam and bounced at exactly the angle Jake had calculated. It ricocheted off 2 more surfaces before striking the primary target from behind, completely bypassing the energy barriers that protected the front approach. The alien cadets fell silent. Jake walked calmly to retrieve his spear. The holographic target flickered and died, marked as destroyed by the arena's sensors. Impossible, Kixara whispered. The barriers were active. How did the projectile penetrate the defensive grid? He didn't penetrate it, Amy said, understanding dawning in her voice. He went around it. Commander Vextai reset the arena with a new configuration. This time the targets were positioned to prevent ricochet attacks. Energy barriers covered all possible angles. Automated defense turrets activated, ready to shoot down any incoming projectiles. Again, Vextai ordered. Jake studied the new setup. The arena designers had clearly anticipated his previous strategy. Every approach was covered, every angle protected. The automated turrets tracked movement, ready to intercept anything that moved toward the targets. Jake smiled. He threw his spear directly at the nearest defense turret. The automated system tried to shoot down the incoming projectile, but Jake had aimed for the turret's sensor array. The spear struck the sensors and destroyed them, blinding the turret. With the defense system partially disabled, Jake sprinted forward. He grabbed his spear as it fell and used it as a pole vault to leap over the energy barriers. He landed behind the target array and systematically destroyed each one with precise thrusts. The arena fell silent except for the hum of deactivating systems. How? Grom asked, his diamond skin slowly returning to normal rock texture. The human has no special abilities. No acid, no hardness, no electrical generation. He has adaptation, Wisp said, his gaseous form swirling with what looked like confusion. Each attack was different. Each solution was new. Commander Vextai walked into the arena and examined the destroyed targets. His crystalline form reflected the emergency lighting as he studied Jake's work. Cadet Martinez, explain your methodology. Jake leaned on his spear, breathing hard from the exertion. Sir, every other species here fights the same way every time. Kythera use acid. Terrans use strength. Nebulans use gas form. But humans learn to fight differently every time. Continue. We don't have one natural weapon, so we learn to make whatever weapon the situation needs. We can't predict what problems we'll face, so we got good at solving new problems quickly. Vextai's form shimmered again. You suggest that lacking specialized evolution made humans more adaptable? Yes, sir. Every other species here is perfectly designed for one type of combat, but perfect designs can't change when the situation changes. Humans stayed flexible. Jake held up his improvised spear. This weapon didn't exist an hour ago. I made it from garbage because that's what the situation required. Tomorrow I might need something completely different, so I'll make that instead. The alien cadets looked at each other with new understanding. Their natural weapons were incredible, but they were also fixed. A Kithara would always fight with acid. A Terran would always rely on diamond skin. But humans could become whatever the battle demanded. Commander Vextai made extensive notes on his pad. The human had just challenged everything the Academy taught about combat evolution. Final test, Vextai announced. Full combat simulation. All cadets will face the same scenario simultaneously. Jake gripped his spear tighter. The real test was just beginning. The arena transformed around them as Commander Vextai activated the full combat simulation. Walls rose from the floor, creating a maze of corridors and chambers. Hostile targets appeared throughout the structure, each one programmed with different defensive capabilities and attack patterns. Your mission is simple, Vextai announced. Navigate the maze and neutralize all hostile targets. You will be scored on speed, efficiency, and tactical innovation. Begin. The alien cadets scattered immediately, each heading into the maze with confidence in their biological advantages. Kixara scuttled along the walls, her acid ready to dissolve any obstacle. Grom simply walked through the barriers, his diamond skin making him nearly invulnerable. Wisp became gas and flowed through the ventilation system. Jake stood at the entrance for several seconds, studying the maze layout. Amy waited beside him, still uncertain about her role in this exercise. "What's the plan?" she asked. "Same plan. Humans have always used," Jake replied, adjusting his grip on the improvised spear. "Figure it out as we go." They entered the maze together. The first corridor was narrow, designed to limit movement and force cadets into predictable attack patterns. Jake could hear combat sounds echoing from other parts of the maze as his classmates engaged the hostile targets. The first enemy appeared around a corner. It was a holographic construct designed to look like an armored soldier, complete with energy rifle and personal shields. The construct opened fire immediately, energy bolts scorching the air where Jake had been standing. But Jake was already moving. Instead of charging directly at the enemy like most cadets would, he used his spear as a lever to launch himself up the wall. He kicked off the ceiling and came down behind the construct, driving his spear through the projected armor where the defensive systems were weakest. The target dissolved as the simulation registered a kill. "How did you know where to strike?" Amy asked. "Same place armor is always weakest," Jake explained. "Joints and connection points. Doesn't matter if it's medieval plate mail or advanced energy shields. The principles don't change." They moved deeper into the maze. Jake used his spear not just as a weapon but as a tool. He leveraged open doors that were meant to stay closed. He triggered pressure plates from a distance. When they encountered a barrier that was too high to climb, Jake used the spear to pole vault over it. Amy began to understand what made Jake different from their alien classmates. The other cadets used their natural abilities like hammers, applying the same solution to every problem. Jake used his weapon like a Swiss Army knife, finding new applications for the same tool based on what each situation demanded. In the maze's central chamber, they caught up with Kixara. The Kithara was facing 3 heavily armored targets that had adapted to her acid attacks. Her projectiles were no longer effective against their improved defenses. "The targets learn," Kixara clicked in frustration. "They have adapted to my acid. How do I defeat targets that cannot be dissolved?" Jake studied the situation. The targets had indeed adapted their defenses, but they had focused entirely on acid resistance. "Amy, distract them from the front." Amy looked terrified but nodded. She shouted and waved her arms, drawing the target's attention. Their sensors locked onto her movement, tracking her as a potential threat. Jake circled behind them, moving silently. When he struck, he didn't aim for the armor at all. Instead, he used his spear to sever the power cables that connected the targets to the arena's energy grid. All 3 targets shut down simultaneously. Kixara stared at the deactivated enemies. "You found a weakness I could not see." "Different perspective," Jake explained. "You were thinking about how to penetrate their armor. I was thinking about how to turn them off." They continued through the maze, picking up other cadets who had become stuck at various challenges. Grom had encountered enemies that used sonic weapons, which could crack even his diamond skin. Jake solved the problem by using his spear to collapse part of the ceiling, burying the sonic emitters under debris. Wisp had been trapped by magnetic fields that disrupted his gas form. Jake used his spear to short-circuit the magnetic generators by jamming metal fragments into their cooling vents. Each solution was different. Each approach was improvised based on the specific problem they faced. Jake never used the same tactic, twice. The human fights like he has fought these battles before, Zara observed as Jake helped her past an electrical barrier by using his spear as a grounding rod. No, Amy said, beginning to feel proud of her species for the first time since arriving at the academy. He fights like humans have been fighting every kind of battle for thousands of years. In the final chamber, all the cadets faced the ultimate challenge. A massive combat construct, heavily armored and armed with multiple weapon systems. It was designed to be unbeatable by any single cadet's natural abilities. The alien students attacked with everything they had: acid, electricity, diamond fists, and gas clouds struck the construct from all directions. But its defenses held. The machine was too well designed, too heavily protected. Jake watched the failed attacks and nodded to himself. Amy, I need you to get everyone to attack at exactly the same time. All their strongest abilities focused on the front armor. Why? Because while it's defending against everything they've got, it won't notice me removing its legs. Amy coordinated the alien cadets into a simultaneous assault. Every natural weapon hit the construct at once, overloading its defensive systems and demanding all its attention. Jake slipped around behind the machine and systematically destroyed its mobility systems with precise spear thrusts. When the construct tried to turn to face this new threat, it toppled over, its own weight working against it. Jake drove his spear through the machine's main processor, ending the simulation. The arena fell silent as the holographic environment shut down. Commander Vextai stood motionless for a long moment, his crystalline form refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns. Combat simulation complete, he finally announced. All targets neutralized. Time elapsed. 18 minutes, 37 seconds. The alien cadets looked at Jake with new respect. He had solved every problem they couldn't solve, using nothing but an improvised weapon and human ingenuity. How? Kixara asked. How does one species become so adaptable? Jake cleaned metal shavings off his spear with a piece of fabric. We had to. We didn't evolve any special weapons, so we had to get creative or die. Commander Vextai approached Jake, his evaluation pad glowing with data. Cadet Martinez, your performance raises questions about human combat doctrine. What kind of questions, sir? The kind that will change how this academy trains warriors. Commander Vextai stood before the assembled cadets in the academy's main briefing room. Word of the humans' performance had spread throughout the station, and military instructors from every department had come to observe the debriefing. Jake sat quietly, his improvised spear resting against his chair. The weapon looked out of place among the advanced technology surrounding them, but every alien in the room kept glancing at it with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Today's exercise revealed something significant about combat evolution. Vextai began, his crystalline voice carrying to every corner of the room. We have always assumed that biological specialization represents the pinnacle of warrior development. Admiral Torvek, a massive Terran who commanded the academy, shifted in his reinforced chair. Commander Vextai, are you suggesting our evolutionary advantages are somehow inferior? I am suggesting they may be limited, Vextai replied. Observe the data. Holographic displays showed the combat simulation results. Each alien cadet had performed exactly as expected, using their species' traditional methods with predictable efficiency. But Jake's path through the maze was completely different, full of solutions that no instructor had anticipated. The human cadet encountered 17 distinct tactical challenges, Vextai continued. He used 17 different approaches. No other cadet demonstrated more than 3 tactical variations. Dr. Length, a voltaic research specialist, leaned forward. This could be an anomaly. One human does not represent an entire species. Amy Foster stood up from her seat. Sir, permission to speak? Vextai nodded. Jake isn't unusual for a human. We all think like this. We have to because we don't have any other choice. The room buzzed with alien conversations as species discussed this claim in their various languages. Jake could hear clicking, humming, and sounds he couldn't identify. "Explain," Admiral Torvek rumbled. Amy looked at Jake, who nodded encouragement. "Humans don't have acid or diamond skin or electrical generation. When we face a problem, we can't just use the same biological solution our ancestors used. We have to invent a new solution every time." "Impossible," said Captain Nexery, a Cathara instructor. "Constant innovation would be exhausting. Species develop biological advantages specifically to avoid the need for constant problem-solving." Jake finally spoke. "That's exactly why humans are dangerous." Every alien in the room turned to look at him. Jake stood holding his crude spear. "You all evolved perfect solutions to specific problems. Cathara developed acid for breaking down barriers. Terrans developed diamond skin for defense. Nebulons developed gas form for infiltration." Jake walked to the center of the room, his spear tapping against the metal floor with each step. "But what happens when you face a problem your evolution didn't prepare you for? Kixara couldn't adapt when the targets became acid-resistant. Grom couldn't handle sonic weapons. Wisp was helpless against magnetic fields. And you could handle all these challenges because?" Admiral Torvek asked. "Because humans never evolved a perfect solution to any problem. We stayed adaptable because we had to stay adaptable." Jake held up his improvised weapon. "This spear represents 50,000 years of human problem-solving. My ancestors looked at mammoths and invented hunting techniques. They looked at enemies with better weapons and invented better tactics. They looked at problems that seemed impossible and invented solutions anyway." Commander Vextai's form shimmered with deep thought. "You suggest that humans' lack of biological weapons became an evolutionary advantage?" "Yes, sir. Every human carries the accumulated knowledge of every human who ever faced a problem and refused to give up. We don't just use our own abilities. We use everything our species ever learned." Dr. Lainth activated a holographic display showing human history. "These records show constant technological advancement. Humans developed thousands of different weapon types, hundreds of fighting styles, dozens of tactical doctrines. Because we had to," Amy added. "Every time we thought we had the perfect solution, someone found a way to beat it. So we had to invent something better." Jake pointed to the alien cadets around the room. "How many different ways can a Cathara attack?" "Acid projection, acid spray, acid coating of natural claws," Kixara listed. 3 primary methods. Humans have invented thousands of ways to attack, and we keep inventing new ones. We're not stronger or faster or tougher than most species, but we're the only ones who never stop adapting." Admiral Torvek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a note Jake had never heard before. "Respect. Commander Vextai, I want a full analysis of human combat doctrine. If this cadet represents typical human adaptability, we need to understand the implications." "Sir?" Vextai asked. "If humans can turn furniture into weapons and solve problems their evolution never prepared them for, what could they accomplish with proper military resources?" Jake felt the weight of attention from every alien in the room. They were looking at him differently now, not as a primitive being who lacked natural weapons, but as something potentially more dangerous than any of them. "Cadet Martinez," Admiral Torvek continued. "You and Cadet Foster are reassigned to Special Operations training. We have missions that require the kind of adaptability you demonstrated today." "What kind of missions, sir?" Jake asked. "The kind where the problems are always new and the solutions haven't been invented yet." As the briefing ended and the alien cadets filed out, Jake noticed they gave him more space than before. Not out of fear, exactly, but out of a new understanding of what humans represented. Amy walked beside him as they left the briefing room. "Think they finally get it?" Jake looked back at the room full of alien military officials, all of them discussing human potential in hushed tones. "I think they're starting to realize that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy might be a species that never stops thinking of new ways to win." He hefted his improvised spear, already thinking about improvements. He could make with better materials and more time. That was the human way. Always working toward the next solution, the next adaptation, the next impossible victory. Behind them, Commander Vextai was updating the Academy's threat assessment database. Under the entry for human combat capability, he deleted the previous rating of minimal and replaced it with unpredictable, extreme caution advised.